The pain from the cracked ribs blurred my vision as my son-in-law, Rick, roared, demanding $500,000. Then I heard the click, my own daughter, Sarah, locking the door, sealing me inside with him. They forgot about the old military surplus radio in the corner, and they definitely were not ready for the SOS I was about to send. Yeah, that click. That is the sound that broke me, more than the ribs ever did. But before all that hell broke loose, before he came, my life was quiet. Everything had its place. Hello, folks. I am Jake. It is good to have friendly ears listening in. This old house got pretty lonely after my wife passed, but having you all here, even just over the airwaves, it feels warmer. If you are listening, maybe drop a comment. Let me know where you are tuning in from. Florida, Texas, somewhere back in the Midwest? It is just good to know you are not alone. The life of a retired colonel does not mean sleeping in. I am still up at 0500. The sun is not even thinking about it. I do not need an alarm clock. Discipline gets in your bones, stays there. First thing, always, is the coffee. Nothing fancy, you understand. Just strong black coffee from the old percolator. I have a ritual. I dust the medals in my office. They are in a glass case by the window. It is not about showing off. It is about remembering. Remembering the cost of freedom. My wife, Martha, God rest her soul, she used to say, I love those things more than I loved myself. Maybe she was right. They are my legacy. They are a testament. The only real problem is the hip. Shrapnel from a lifetime ago. Every morning, that dull, grinding ache reminds me I am not the young Marine I used to be. It is a harsh reality, but it is mine. It keeps me honest. The place I feel most whole, most myself, is the woodshop out back. The smell of machine oil and pine, that is the smell of control. I can spend hours in there, restoring an old chair, or just sharpening my chisels. Everything has its place. The Craftsman hammer, the DeWalt saw, they do not betray you. They do exactly what you ask of them, every single time. Fixing things with my own hands is a declaration, a statement that I am still useful, that I do not need anyone, I can take care of myself. That is what a man does. At least, that is what I thought, until the day Sarah called. I was underneath my old pickup, changing the oil, when the phone rang. It was Sarah, and she was crying. I felt my chest tighten up immediately. A father knows that sound. It is a specific kind of dread. Dad. Rick. He lost his job again. Again. I just stayed quiet, listening to her choke on the words. We do not have anywhere to go. His creditors are looking for him. Dad, can we just come home? Just for a little while? I let out a long breath, staring at the drip of black oil on the concrete floor. My whole life, I had been the provider, the decision maker. That role had faded. I knew it. But she is still my daughter. A father's duty does not get to retire. Come on home, kid. I said it. And I had no idea I had just invited the devil over my own threshold. They showed up the next day. Sarah looked worn down to a nub, her eyes puffy and red. And then there was Rick, my son-in-law, a man of 40 with a handshake like a wet dish rag and eyes that never ever looked straight at you. Those eyes darted around my living room, and I could swear I saw him calculating the value of everything. The clock on the mantel, the rugs. Hey, Colonel, he said. Wow, this place is solid. Lots of antiques. I did not like the way he said antiques. He was not talking about the tables. He was talking about me. Sarah just rushed past, pulling him by the arm. Rick, let me get you upstairs. I saw her flinch, just a little, as she brushed past him. A cold, sharp sense of unease ran right down my spine. That night, I saw the first real sign. I was heading up the stairs to my room. That damned hip was screaming at me. Every step was a grind. Suddenly, Rick was right behind me. Let me help, Pop, he said, his voice all sugary sweet. Before I could even answer, he grabbed my upper arm. His fingers dug in like an iron clamp. A jolt of sharp pain shot right to my shoulder. "Wow, you are unsteady," he said, still with that fake friendly tone. "Careful, you do not fall." The humiliation hurt more than the pain. He was not helping me. He was testing me, seeing how much pressure I could take. I yanked my arm free. I can walk on my own. I would rather grit my teeth against the pain in my hip than ever admit that kind of weakness. That night, before I got into bed, I looked in the mirror. Already forming on my bicep was a dark, ugly bruise in the perfect shape of 5 fingers. In just 1 week, my house was a foreign country. The TV blared all day. Loud, trashy reality shows I did not even know existed. Rick had claimed my favorite Lazy Boy recliner, the one Martha bought me my last year in the service. He would be in it from noon till midnight, his dirty boots propped up on the fabric. The whole living room started to smell like cheap beer and cigarettes. Sarah, she was like a ghost. She would just drift through the kitchen, silent, always glancing at Rick before she dared to say a word to me. Dinner became a kind of torture. Me, a retired Marine colonel, sitting at the head of my own table, feeling like an intruder. The order was gone. The chaos had begun. The trouble really started when Rick discovered my office. That room was my sanctuary. 40 years of service on those walls. The good conduct medals, the commendations, the picture of Martha on my desk, the flag from my retirement ceremony, folded in its triangular case. Rick wandered in, a can of beer in his hand. "Geez, you got a lot of medals," he said. He picked one up, a service ribbon. "How much do you think these things are worth now?" I snatched it from his hand. "They are not for sale," he laughed. That wheezing, high-pitched laugh. "Come on, Colonel. They are just old pieces of tin. We should clear all this junk out. Make it a proper media room. Put a big flat screen right here." I felt the blood rush to my head. He did not just want my money. He wanted to erase who I was. "Get out," I hissed. He just shrugged, holding his hands up. All right, old man. Calm down. Just an idea." A few days later, it happened. I was coming down the stairs, holding the banister tight. The hip was bad that morning. Rick was right behind me, yammering on about some investment he needed money for. I was just ignoring him, focusing on the next step. Suddenly, I felt a hard push in the small of my back. It was not a nudge, it was a shove. I lost my balance completely. I tumbled down the last 3 steps, landing hard on the wooden floor, my left shoulder taking the full impact. A white-hot explosion of pain shot through my whole body. Oh my God. "Dad!" I heard Sarah scream from the kitchen. Rick was down the steps in a second, his face a mask of fake panic. "My God, Colonel, you gotta be more careful. That hip is really failing you, is not it?" He was blaming me, gaslighting me, but I knew. I felt his hand. It was no accident. That night, I waited until Rick went out for more beer. I found Sarah in the kitchen. She was scrubbing an already clean kitchen counter. "Sarah," I said, my voice low, "you have to listen to me." "Rick," he pushed me. She would not look at me. Her hands just kept moving, faster and faster, scrubbing. "Dad, do not say that. Please, he is under a lot of stress. He is worried about you. You know your hip." "It is a lie, Sarah." "Dad," she cut me off, and her voice was sharp, frantic. "Please, just do not make things worse. He is just trying to help." And I saw it. It was not that she did not believe me. She was too terrified to believe me. That avenue for help was blocked. After the fall, Rick had the perfect excuse to take care of me. He would insist on helping me into the bathroom, helping me up from my chair. And every time, his fingers would find the exact same spot on my arm, digging into the old bruises, making them fresh again. He would help me up, and I would have to grit my teeth so hard I thought they would crack, just to keep from crying out. One time, Sarah saw me wince. She saw the dark, mottled bruises on my arm when my sleeve rode up. "Rick," she whispered, "you are hurting him." Rick turned and just stared at her, a look so cold it froze the air in the room. "I am keeping him from falling, Sarah. You want him to break a bone? Is that what you want?" She just shrank, like a flower in a frost. She ducked her head and backed out of the room. I knew, right then, I was completely on my own. I had to get out of there. I had to talk to someone. I lied, said I had a doctor's appointment. I got in my truck and drove straight to the VFW post. Mike Sloan was there, sitting at his usual table, nursing a cup of black coffee. Mike and I, we had been through hell and back together. He was a brother, in the way only another Marine can be. I sat down across from him. Mike just looked at me for a long time. He has got that quiet detective's gaze, does not miss a thing. "Jake," he said, his voice a low rumble, "you look like hell. What is going on?" As I lifted my coffee cup, my sleeve pulled back. He saw the bruise on my forearm. His eyes narrowed. "What the hell is this, Colonel?" I opened my mouth. I swear I was going to tell him. I was going to tell him everything. But I looked at Mike, another Marine, a man who had seen me at my strongest, and I just could not. I could not admit that I, Colonel Jake Walsh, was being bullied by his own son-in-law like a child. The shame of it, the fear of being seen as weak, as a burden, it was stronger than the fear of Rick. "It is nothing," I said, forcing my voice to sound steady. "Tripped in the shop. You know this hip. Just clumsy." I saw him squint. He did not buy it, not for a second. But he is a soldier. He respects the words, even when he knows they are a lie. He just nodded, slow. "Right, Colonel. Clumsy." The silence between us was heavy. I finished my coffee, said my goodbyes, and walked out. I had just cut my only lifeline. It all came apart with a phone call. The kind of polite, automated voice that tells you your world is about to end. It was the power company. "Sir, Mr. Walsh, this is a courtesy call to inform you that your account is 30 days past due. We will be forced to disconnect service if payment is not received." I just stood there, phone pressed to my ear, completely stunned. I have never been late on a bill in my life, not once. It is a point of pride, of order. I had given Rick the cash, the checkbook, to handle all of it. "Let me take care of it, Pop," he had said, his voice slick with false concern. "You just rest." I walked into my office, my heart starting to pound a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. The room, my sanctuary, suddenly felt cold. I pulled out my ledger, the one I have kept for 30 years, the neat columns of expenses and payments. I turned to the current month. It was blank. I found the bank statements I had tossed in the drawer, unopened. My hands trembled slightly as I tore one open. I started reading. Withdrawal after withdrawal. ATM, $500. Check cashed, $1,000. Another, $2,000. Thousands of dollars, just gone. The checks were made out to cash, with my signature clumsily forged on the bottom. It was a crude imitation, but good enough to fool a busy teller. It hit me then, a sickening lurch in my gut. I was not just being mistreated. I was not just being disrespected. I was being systematically robbed. I found Rick in the living room, in my chair, of course, watching some game show where people screamed and jumped around. I did not raise my voice. I kept it low, cold, like the steel of a rifle barrel in winter. "Where is the money, Rick?" I held out the bank statement, my hand perfectly steady. For the first time since he had arrived, he did not bother with the act. The friendly, concerned smile vanished. It was replaced by the dead-eyed, shameless look of an addict staring down an obstacle. "The old man is finally catching on," he said. He did not even look away from the TV. "I owe some people, Pop. I owe them a lot." He leaned back in my chair, and put his feet up on my coffee table, leaving a smudge on the polished wood. "And you are going to help me. This house, your pension, your savings, It has got to be worth at least $500,000. I need you to sign some papers. Power of attorney. He said it so casually, like he was asking for the TV remote. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless for a second. Are you insane? I roared, the rage finally breaking through the ice in my veins. I am not giving you 1 red cent. Rick laughed that awful wheezing laugh, finally turning to look at me. You think you have a choice? You are a burden, old man. That word, burden. It hit me harder than any punch, any shove. It was a poison dart aimed at the very core of my identity. Sarah has to look after you all day, he went on, his voice dripping with venom, twisting reality into a weapon. I have to put up with your endless stories and your complaining about that hip. You owe us. Now sign the papers. He threw a thick stack of documents on the table. The pages skidded across the wood. Or else, he said, letting the words hang in the air, things are going to get a lot worse. A cold dread, colder than anything I had ever felt on a battlefield, washed over me. This was not about careless shoves anymore. This was a threat, plain and simple. The second he left the room, I grabbed for the phone on the end table. The old landline. I had to call Mike. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely punch in the 7 numbers. The phone rang once, a lifeline of hope. Then, nothing. Dead air. Rick was standing in the doorway, a cruel smirk on his face. Who you calling, Colonel? He asked, and he snatched the phone right out of my hand. He looked at the caller ID screen. Mike Sloan. Your cop buddy? He smirked. Nobody is coming to save you. He shoved the phone in his pocket. And just to make sure you do not go wandering off and hurt yourself, he said, his voice thick with sarcasm, you should get some rest, in your room. He shoved me toward the hallway, toward my bedroom. I stumbled, catching myself on the doorframe, my hips screaming in protest. Sarah! I yelled. Sarah! She was standing there, at the end of the hall, her face pale, trembling like a frightened animal. Sarah, do not let him do this. Please, honey. Rick came up behind her, putting his hands on her shoulders, a gesture that looked like comfort but was really an anchor, holding her in place. It is okay, honey. Your dad is just tired. He needs some quiet time. He is not thinking clearly. And then, I heard it. The click. Rick had locked the bedroom door from the outside. I lunged for the knob, twisting it uselessly. It was locked solid. I pounded on the wood with my fists, the impacts jarring my already aching bones. Sarah, open the door! Sarah! But all I heard was the sound of their footsteps fading away down the hall. I was locked in, a prisoner in my own home. I slid down to the floor, my back against the locked door. The silence in the room was deafening. This was it, my worst fear realized. Not dying in combat, not a long sickness. This, helplessness, total, absolute dependence, stripped of my dignity, stripped of my freedom. I looked around the room I had shared with Martha for 40 years, filled with our memories. Now it was a cell. Rick had won this round. He had turned me from a soldier into a useless old man in a locked room. A wave of fury rose in me, so hot it made me dizzy, but it was followed by a cold, crushing despair. How do you fight your way out of this when you have no phone, no allies, and no way out? I was locked in that room for nearly a day. The sun went down and the room grew dark. I did not sleep. The next morning, the thirst was the worst part. My mouth was dry as dust. No food, no water, just the muffled sound of the television droning on from the living room. Then I heard it, a knock on the front door. Not a polite rap, a firm, solid, authoritative knock, the kind a cop makes. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mike. It had to be Mike. My lie at the VFW, it had not worked. He knew something was wrong. I heard Rick's voice, suddenly laced with a nervous energy. Yes, officer, can I help you? Hope, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, surged through me. It was a painful, desperate feeling. I scrambled to the bedroom door and started banging on it with everything I had left. "Help me! I am in here! Help me!" I heard Mike's voice, clear and strong, cutting through the wall. "We received a request for a welfare check on Colonel Walsh. Where is he?" I heard Rick give a nervous little laugh, a disgusting sound. "Oh, the Colonel. He is right here. Dad, the police are here to see you." The key rattled in the lock. The door swung open. Rick stood there, flanked by Mike and a younger uniformed officer. Rick had arranged his face into a mask of weary exhaustion, the picture of a devoted son-in-law at the end of his rope. "I am so sorry about this, officers," he said, shaking his head with practiced sadness. He gets confused. It is the old war injury in his hip, the pain. It makes him imagine things. We had to lock the door. He keeps trying to wander off, and he falls. We are just trying to keep him safe. Mike looked right past him, his eyes locking on mine. His gaze was intense, searching. "Colonel? Jake? Are you okay? Is anyone hurting you?" This was it. My chance. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue. I opened my mouth to speak, and then I saw Sarah. She was hovering in the hallway behind Rick, shrinking into the shadows, making herself small. She was trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Rick turned his head slightly and gave her a look, just a glance. But it was filled with so much poison, so much menace. It was a threat all by itself, a silent promise of what would happen after the police were gone. Sarah's eyes met mine. They were wide with terror, and they were pleading. "Dad," she whispered, so low only I could hear. "Dad, please, just tell them you are okay. Tell them you were just confused." My throat closed up. My words turned to dust in my mouth. If I told the truth, what would Rick do to her after they left? What fresh hell would he unleash on her? I had faced enemy fire without flinching, but I could not risk my daughter's safety. I had failed to protect her from this monster, and now I had to keep failing her to keep her safe. It was a bitter, terrible pill to swallow. I dropped my gaze to the floor, unable to look Mike in the eye. "I am fine, Mike." My voice was a raw croak. I just got a little mixed up. The hip. It was acting up. Rick is right. I just needed to rest. I felt it more than I saw it. The disappointment coming off Mike in waves. His shoulders slumped. He knew I was lying. He had to know. But his hands were tied. A victim has to be willing to be saved. "All right, Colonel," he said, his voice flat, professional. "If you need anything." He and the other officer left. Rick shut the front door behind them, the sound echoing with finality. The second he heard the police cruiser pull away, the caring son-in-law act evaporated. He turned to me, his face twisted with rage. "Nice try, old man," he snarled, and then the slap. It was so fast, so sharp, my head snapped back and hit the doorframe. The world exploded in a flash of white light and ringing in my ears. "You think you are so smart, huh?" he roared, his face inches from mine, spittle flying. "You think your little friends can help you?" He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling back into the bedroom. I fell onto the floor in a heap. "Sarah," he commanded, his voice like a whip crack, "lock the door." I looked up at my daughter. Tears were streaming down her face. She was sobbing, a broken, silent sound, but she walked forward, took the key, and locked me in. The second click. Somehow, that one hurt even more than the first. Hope was dead. Being locked in there, that was the worst of it. They took my phone. They took my truck keys. They took my ability to decide anything for myself. I would just sit there, staring at the four walls, and think about my woodshop. I ached to hold a hammer, just to feel the solid, reliable weight of a good tool in my hand. That was my place. The one place I was still me. It makes me wonder, do you have a place like that? A place or a job, maybe just fixing a leaky faucet or tending the yard, that makes you feel like you are still you? Let me know in the comments. I would really like to know. After the welfare check, the pretense was over. Rick did not bother with the fake smiles or the concerned act anymore. He treated me like a prisoner of war. The door would unlock twice a day. He would shove a plate inside, usually with a piece of dry bread and a small bowl of cold, greasy soup. It was the kind of food you would not serve a dog. One day, he slid the tray in, and I just looked at it. The watery broth, the single, sad-looking potato floating in it like a corpse. I could see the film of congealed fat on the surface. I pushed it back with my foot. I am not eating this garbage. Rick smiled, a slow, cruel stretching of his lips. Oh, you think you have a choice? He picked up the bowl, looked at me right in the eye, and poured the soup onto the wooden floor. It splashed around my feet, cold and disgusting. The smell of stale broth filled the room. Then starve, he said. He walked out and locked the door. The hunger was a gnawing beast in my belly, a constant dull ache that twisted my insides. But my pride was a sharper pain. I would not let him break me that way. I would not give him the satisfaction. But the food was not the worst part. The worst part was the medicine. I have high blood pressure, high cholesterol. A man my age, it is just part of the deal. I take Lipitor and a beta blocker every single day. They are the little things that keep the engine running, that keep my heart from giving up. They are the invisible armor against my own body's betrayal. Rick knew that. He came into the room one morning, not with food, but with my pill bottles in his hand. He shook them, the rattling sound echoing in the quiet room like a death rattle. "You know, Pop," he said, his voice casual, "these are pretty expensive, and you have not been very cooperative lately. You're a bad investment." He walked into the small bathroom connected to my bedroom. I heard the toilet lid open. He twisted the cap off my blood pressure medication and, with a flourish, turned the bottle upside down. I watched the little white pills cascade into the toilet bowl, a small white pile of my future. "Maybe you do not need these anymore," he said. "If you sign the papers, I will be happy to go to the pharmacy and get you a refill. A whole new bottle. See? I'm a reasonable man." He smiled that dead-eyed smile and flushed the toilet. I watched the pills swirl and vanish in a vortex of water, my life, my health, circling the drain. He was not just trying to control me, he was killing me, one missed boom at a time, and he was making me watch. He did not just attack my body, he kept attacking my soul. One afternoon, he stumbled in, drunk, reeking of cheap whiskey. He was holding one of my most sacred possessions, the American flag, folded into a tight, perfect triangle. The flag that had draped my own father's casket, a WAWA veteran. It had sat on the mantle in my office for 30 years. "This thing, it is useless," he slurred, holding it unsteadily. "Just a piece of cloth." He dropped it to the floor and used it, my father's flag, to wipe up a beer he had spilled. The crisp, clean fabric turned dark and sticky. A roar, a sound I did not know I was capable of making, tore from my throat. It came from a place deeper than muscle and bone. I tried to launch myself at him, to protect that flag with whatever I had left, but my hip gave way, screaming in protest. I just staggered, a pathetic, clumsy old man, my body betraying my spirit. It was a mistake. He slapped me, a hard, open-handed crack across the face that sent my head ringing. Then another. The impacts were dull, humiliating. "Stay down, old man." He kicked the soiled flag into the corner of the room, leaving it there in a heap like a dirty rag. "You will pay for that," I whispered, tasting the salt of blood on my lip. "You will pay." Sometimes Sarah would sneak in, when Rick was passed out on the couch or out on one of his mysterious errands that took him hours. She would bring a glass of water, a piece of fruit, her hands shaking so badly the water would slosh over the rim. "Dad," she would whisper, tears in her eyes, never looking at me directly. "Dad, just sign it. Please, just do what he says, and it will all be over. We can be a family again." "What are you talking about, Sarah?" I would plead with her, my voice a hoarse whisper. "He is killing me. Can you not see that? He is destroying you. Look at yourself." She would just shake her head violently, her finger to her lips. "Shh, he will hear you. I cannot. Dad, I just cannot." She was more terrified than I was. That spark, that fire my daughter used to have, it was gone, extinguished. She was not my daughter anymore. She was his property. I looked into her vacant, frightened eyes, and I knew there was no help coming from her. She was a prisoner, too. Rick started to have fun. He knew I valued order, silence. He knew I needed rest. So he put a large speaker right outside my door and blasted heavy metal music all night long. It wasn't even music, it was just noise. A chaotic, grinding wall of sound. The bass was not just a sound, it was a physical thing. It vibrated through the floorboards, up through the bed, and into my bones. It pulsed in time with the throbbing headache that had become my constant companion since the medicine had stopped. It is a classic interrogation technique. You wear down the subject. You deny them sleep. You deny them peace until they are too exhausted to fight, too broken to resist. He was softening me up, getting me ready for the final push. I lay there on the bed, night after night, hungry, exhausted, in constant pain. I could feel my blood pressure rising, a dangerous, pulsing pressure behind my eyes that made the room swim. But you do not serve 30 years in the Marine Corps to learn how to quit. A colonel does not surrender. If I could not fight him with my body, I would fight him with my mind. So I started to observe. I listened through the noise. I made a mental timetable. When did Rick leave the house for his fixes? 2 p.m. When was he the most drunk, the most careless? After midnight. I noted every pattern, every weakness. I was a soldier on a reconnaissance mission in enemy territory. My eyes scanned the room, searching for a weapon, for any advantage, and then they landed on it. In the corner, covered by an old dust cloth, my old ham radio set, a vintage Yaesu, a souvenir from my service days. I remembered hauling a similar model through the jungles of Panama. It was not plugged in. The antenna was disconnected. To Rick, it was just a heavy metal box, but seeing it planted a seed, a desperate, crazy idea. The first flicker of a battle plan. The screams from downstairs woke me from a fitful sleep. It sounded like Rick's creditors had come to collect. I heard the crash of furniture, the sound of glass breaking. I heard Rick's voice, high and pleading, thin with terror. "I will get you the money, I swear. Tomorrow, I promise." Then, a door slammed with the force of a thunderclap. Silence. A long, heavy silence that felt more dangerous than the noise. And then I heard it. Footsteps, not walking, running, thundering up the stairs. The key jammed into the lock. The door flew open. Rick burst in. His face was a twitching mask of desperation, his eyes bloodshot and wild. In his hand was the stack of power of attorney papers and a pen. "The deadline is tomorrow, old man," he hissed. "Sign it. Now." I looked at him, this pathetic, terrified creature. I looked at the papers in his hand. $500,000. My entire life's work. Martha's legacy. The years of sacrifice, of saving, of planning. The money that was supposed to be Sarah's future, if she ever found a way to escape him. I had nothing left to lose. I was weak. I was starving. But I was still a colonel. I reached out and took the stack of papers. Rick smiled, a horrid, triumphant grin, thinking I had finally broken. And with every last ounce of strength I had, I ripped the papers in half, and then in half again, and again. I ripped them into 100 little pieces and threw the confetti of my life's savings right in his face. "Get out of my house!" He did not speak for a second. His face went from red to a terrifying, bloodless white. All the manic energy drained away, replaced by something cold and dead. And then he roared, It was not a human sound. It was the sound of an animal, a cornered predator. The first punch caught me square in the jaw. My head snapped back and the force of it lifted me off the bed. I crashed into the wardrobe, the wooden frame rattling. Stars exploded behind my eyes. You stupid old man. He was on me before I could even try to get up. He was not punching anymore. He was kicking. Vicious, brutal kicks to my ribs, to my stomach, to my back. I heard a dry, sickening crack from my side. A rib. The pain was so sharp, so intense, it stole my breath. I could not breathe. I could not even scream. I just curled into a ball on the floor, the world shrinking to a tunnel of agony as he kept kicking, over and over. Sarah. I forced the name through my bruised lips, a desperate, gargled cry. Sarah, help me! I heard her running. She appeared in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth, her face a mask of horror. She saw me on the floor, a broken heap. She saw her husband, his leg drawn back to deliver another kick. Rick, stop! You are going to kill him, she shrieked, her voice thin and reedy. He turned to her, his eyes insane. Get out, he screamed. Get out of here now! She looked at me, lying on the floor, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth onto the wooden planks. I looked at her, my daughter, my little girl. Help me, I whispered, the words barely a breath. She let out a sob, a broken, strangled sound, and covered her face with her hands. She backed away, backed out of the doorway, stumbling as if she couldn't see, and then she did it. She slammed the door shut. I heard the bolt slide home, and the key turning in the lock. Click. She had locked me in. She had locked me in the room with the monster. That betrayal, it hurt more than the broken rib. That sound, that final click, it killed the last living part of my heart. I heard her footsteps running away, her sobs fading down the hall, and then it was just me and Rick in the room. He was breathing hard, looking down at me with contempt. He wiped the blood, my blood, off his shoe onto my rug. See, old man, nobody cares about you, not even your own daughter. She chose me. He bent down and picked up a single shredded piece of the paper, a grim satisfaction on his face. Now, I am going to get some tape. We are going to put this back together, and you are going to sign it, or I am coming back to finish the job on that other hip. He stepped into my bathroom, I guess to find the tape, or maybe a wet towel to wake me up if I passed out. I was alone. I was broken. I was dying, and I had been abandoned by everyone. I lay on the floor, the rough wood grain pressing into my cheek, a small mercy of texture in a world that had dissolved into pure pain. Every breath was a fresh stab of a knife in my side, a grinding reminder of the broken rib. I could taste blood, coppery and slick, in the back of my throat. From the bathroom, I heard the sound of running water, and Rick. He was whistling. A tuneless, cheerful sound that was more terrifying than any scream. He was in there, cleaning my blood off his hands, getting his tape to patch together the life he was stealing from me, and he was whistling while I was dying on the floor. I knew I did not have much time, minutes, maybe. The darkness was creeping in at the edges of my vision, a welcome relief I had to fight against. I could not fight him, not anymore. My body was a wreck, a vessel that had been shattered. I could not run. There was nowhere to go. But I was a Marine, and a Marine never, ever stops fighting. You fight with what you have, where you are. My eyes, blurry with pain, fixed on the corner of the room, on the old Yesu radio. It sat there under its shroud of dust, a relic from another time, from another version of me. But I knew something Rick did not. I kept it maintained. It was a habit born from decades of discipline. I kept a spare battery pack for it, trickle-charged and ready in a small compartment in the back. Always. Old habits die hard. A soldier is always prepared, even in retirement. I started to crawl. It was not a crawl, really. It was more like dragging a dead weight across the floor, my own body. I dug my elbows into the wood, ignoring the splinters, pulling myself forward an inch at a time. The broken rib screamed, a raw, electric agony that threatened to make me black out. The world shrank to a tunnel of pain and the metallic glint of the radio in the dim light. But the image of that soiled American flag in the corner, the sound of that final soul-crushing click of the lock as my daughter shut me in, that pain was worse. It was a different kind of wound, one that bled straight from the soul. It was the fuel. I pulled myself across the floor, leaving a thin, dark smear of my own blood behind me, a snail's trail of my last stand. My fingers finally brushed against the dusty canvas cover. I fumbled with it, my hands clumsy and weak, the muscles refusing to obey. I managed to get a grip and pulled it away. There it was, the cold, solid metal box, my lifeline. My hand trembled as I found the switch for the backup power. I flicked it. For a terrifying second, a long, drawn-out eternity, nothing happened. My heart sank. Then, a low electronic hum, a sound I had not heard in years, and a single, faint green light flickered to life on the frequency display. It was alive, just like me. Barely, but alive. The water in the bathroom shut off. My blood ran cold. He was coming out. I did not have time to speak into the microphone, to try and call for help. My voice was a ruined whisper anyway, but I did not need to. My shaking fingers found the Morse code key, the smooth, cool plastic familiar, even after all these years. Muscle memory is a powerful thing. I flipped the broadcast switch. I closed my eyes, shutting out the pain, shutting out the room, focusing everything I was, everything I had left, into my fingertips. I began to tap. Dit dit dit. Pause. Da da da. Pause. Dit dit dit. S.O.S. The simple universal plea. I sent it again, and again. A desperate rhythmic prayer sent out into the void. S.O.S. S.O.S. On the old Marine Corps emergency frequency. The channel Mike and I had designated years ago as our brother-to-brother line, for emergencies only, a promise made over lukewarm coffee in a dusty tent a world away. You know, it is a funny thing. My whole life I relied on my physical strength, on discipline, on being tougher than the other guy. But when everything was gone, when my body had completely failed me, the one thing that could save me was an old skill. A piece of knowledge that most people would call obsolete, a forgotten language from a bygone era. It gets me thinking. We folks of a certain age, we have lifetimes of experience, of skills the world seems to have moved on from. Have you ever had a moment like that, where you use some old know-how, maybe fixing an engine by sound, or patching something up by hand, or just some piece of wisdom you thought was long forgotten, to solve a modern-day problem? Let me know in the comments. Those legacies, they matter more than people think. The bathroom door opened. Rick stepped out, a roll of silver duct tape in his hand. He stopped dead. His eyes narrowed and his head tilted like a confused dog. He could hear it. The faint, rhythmic beeping from the corner of the room. His gaze followed the sound, first to the radio, then to my hand on the key. What are you doing? Then the realization dawned on his face, twisting his features into a mask of pure fury. He understood. You sly old bastard. He lunged across the room, not at me, but at the radio. He raised his foot to stomp it into pieces, but it was too late. I had sent the signal 5 times. 6. It was out there. The call had been made. I closed my eyes and braced for the impact as his boot came rushing forward. Die already, he screamed. His kick caught the Yesu square in the side, sending it crashing into the wall with a sickening crunch of metal and plastic. The faint green light died. The beeping stopped. The room fell silent again, the only sounds my own ragged breathing and his heavy, furious pants. Useless, he hissed. kicking the now silent box again for good measure. "No one is coming for you. Now, sign the damn papers." He grabbed me by my shirt collar, his knuckles grinding into my collarbone, and dragged me back to the bed. He started crudely taping the shredded documents back together on the nightstand. The pain was making the edges of my vision go dark. I was floating, drifting away, but I was smiling, a bloody, broken smile, because I know Mike Sloan. I know the Marine Corps Brotherhood. That signal was received. I was sure of it. All I had to do now was buy some time. I did not know any of this until Mike told me later, sitting by my hospital bed. He told me he did not go home that night after the failed welfare check. My lie at the VFU, the look in Sarah's eyes, the way I had seemed to shrink in on myself, it had burrowed into his gut like a parasite. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He was at the precinct, late, staring at cold case files but seeing my face. The fluorescent lights of the station hummed overhead, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant. He should have gone home hours ago, but he could not shake the feeling that he had failed a soldier, that he had left a man behind. It went against every fiber of his being. He kept his own radio on his desk, an old habit from his days on patrol. It was always tuned to our old frequency, more out of nostalgia than anything else. Mostly it was just static, a gentle hiss that faded into the background noise of the station. But then, through the hiss, it came, faint at first, a tiny, rhythmic disturbance in the static, like a moth beating its wings against a window pane. Dit-dit-dit, da-da-da, dit-dit-dit. Mike said he froze. He stood up from his desk, leaning closer to the speaker, turning the volume dial up. The signal was weak, wavering, but it was unmistakable. S.O.S. But it was more than that. It was the rhythm, the cadence, the fist, as old radio men call it. Every operator has a unique signature in the way they tap, as unique as a fingerprint. And Mike recognized that fist. He had heard it 1,000 times during drills, during late nights in a command tent half a world away. The rhythm as familiar to him as my own voice. It was me. It was Jake Walsh. It was my signature, my desperate, dying call. Mike told me he did not waste a second. He did not try to radio back. That could have given me away, gotten me killed. He burst out of his office, his chair flying back and hitting the wall with a loud bang that startled the night shift desk sergeant. "Officer down," he yelled, using the code he knew would get the fastest, most overwhelming response. No, worse. Marine Colonel held hostage. We have a 1031, active crime in progress, severe physical assault. The address is Colonel Jake Walsh's residence. I need SWAT mobilized. Now. Breach on arrival. I repeat, breach on arrival. Do not knock. He did not wait for confirmation. He grabbed his jacket, checked the load in his service weapon, and sprinted out to his patrol car. He slammed the car in gear and tore out of the parking lot, lights flashing, sirens screaming into the night. He knew me. He knew my pride. He knew that for me, Colonel Jake Walsh, to send an SOS on a channel that had been silent for 20 years, it meant I was at the absolute end of my rope. It meant I was likely taking my last breaths. The failed welfare check flashed in his mind, the look on my face, the lie he had let me tell. "You stubborn old fool," he muttered, flooring the accelerator, the city lights blurring into streaks around him. "Why did you not just tell me, Jake?" Back in the bedroom, I was doing my best to stall. My mind was foggy, but the soldier part of me was still functioning. Delay the enemy. Make him work for it. Rick had managed to tape the main page of the document back together. It was a mess of tape and torn paper, but my signature line was visible. "Sign it," he growled, shoving the pen into my hand. My fingers were so swollen and stiff I could barely hold it. "No," I whispered, letting the pen drop to the floor. "I will never sign it," he roared in frustration. "You want more? Is that it?" He raised his hand to hit me again, and then we both heard it. A faint sound at first, a high-pitched wail, far away in the distance. but it was getting closer, fast. Rick's head snapped up. His eyes widened. What is that? The siren grew louder, closer, an undeniable scream tearing through the night. Then another joined it, and another. A chorus of approaching rescue. A symphony of flashing red and blue lights began to dance across the bedroom walls. "What did you do?" he shrieked, his eyes darting from me to the broken radio in the corner. He finally understood. Pure animal panic washed over his face. He was no longer the predator. He was the trapped rat. The cops. They are coming for you. He lunged at me, yanking me up from the bed by my broken ribs. A universe of pain exploded in my chest, and I think I blacked out for a second. He dragged me up, using my broken body as a shield, a piece of meat to hide behind. "You are going to tell them everything is fine. You hear me? You are going to—" He never finished the sentence. From downstairs came a sound like a thunderclap, the sound of a battering ram splintering the front door off its hinges, followed by the roar of men shouting, "Police! Get down! Get down now!" Rick never finished his sentence. He was cut off by the sound of tires screeching on the asphalt right outside my window, a sound so close and violent it seemed to tear the night apart. A powerful, disembodied voice boomed from a loudspeaker, a sound that shook the very glass in the panes, vibrating through the floorboards and up into my broken bones. "Police! Open the door now!" Rick's plan, whatever twisted last-ditch effort was forming in his panicked mind, evaporated in that single authoritative command. The snarling predator was gone, replaced by a cornered, terrified animal. Raw panic took over. He lunged and grabbed me, yanking me up from the floor. The world went white with pain as my ribs screamed. He was trying to drag me towards the bedroom door, a clumsy, desperate attempt to use my broken body as a shield. "Shut up," he hissed, his voice cracking. "I will—" Boom! The sound was not a knock. It was a thunderclap from downstairs, the violent, explosive splintering of my solid oak front door being smashed off its hinges. In the sudden ringing silence that followed, I could hear the unmistakable sound of heavy combat boots storming across the hardwood floor of my living room, the sound of order invading chaos. "Upstairs! Front bedroom! Go! Go! Go!" That was Mike's voice, a commander's voice, sharp, clear, and full of purpose. And it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my 70 years on this earth. The monster that was Rick simply dissolved. The predator became prey in the space of a single heartbeat. He shoved me to the floor, the impact sending a fresh wave of agony through my side, and scrambled to the bedroom door, trying to hold it shut with his own shaking body. "No, get out. This is my house," he whimpered, a pathetic, childish lie against a tide of incoming justice. He was pushing against a hurricane. The bedroom door did not just open. It exploded inwards, ripped from its frame by the force of another battering ram. The heavy wood hit Rick squarely, slamming him against the wall with a sickening thud. He slid to the floor in a heap, the air rushing out of his lungs in a pained whoosh. In an instant, the room was full. 3 men in black tactical gear, helmets, and rifles, moving with a fluid, terrifying efficiency that only comes from endless training. They were a single organism of controlled force. "Hands up! Get on the ground! On the ground now!" Red laser dots danced across the room, painting Rick where he lay moaned on the floor. He was no longer the beast who had tortured me. He was just a pathetic, whimpering coward in the face of true power. He curled into a ball, his hands covering his head as if that could somehow make him invisible, as if it could save him from the reckoning he had brought upon himself. Mike Sloan was the 4th man through the door, his own service weapon held low but ready. His eyes took in the scene in a single sweeping glance that missed nothing. He saw the overturned furniture, he saw the broken radio, he saw Rick on the floor, and then he saw me, a broken pile of old bones by the bed, covered in my own blood. I watched the fury in his eyes, the cold, professional anger of a cop, melt into the raw, personal pain of a friend. It was a look of profound sorrow and regret. "Oh, Jake," he breathed, the words thick with a sorrow that hit me harder than any of Rick's punches. He immediately signaled for the paramedics who were right behind him, their bags and stretcher waiting in the hallway, a well-oiled machine of rescue and recovery. "My friend," I whispered, the words catching on the blood in my throat. The pain was making me dizzy, the room starting to spin as the adrenaline began to fade. Get him, Mike." Mike nodded, his jaw tight with an anger he was holding in check. He knelt beside me for just a second, his hand on my good shoulder, a firm, reassuring pressure. "I got you, brother. I am here now. It is over." As they carefully lifted me onto the stretcher, a slow, agonizing process that made every nerve-ending scream, I saw her. Sarah. She was standing in the hallway, frozen, her face a pale, tear-streaked mask of shock. She watched, her eyes wide and vacant, as two officers hauled Rick to his feet, cuffed his hands behind his back with a series of sharp, metallic clicks, and started to drag him away. He saw her then, and his face twisted into a final, venomous snarl. "This is your fault," he spat at her, his voice dripping with hate. "All of it. Your fault." She did not answer. She just stood there, wrapped in a silence that was louder than any scream, as her life, the life she had chosen, fell to pieces around her. I looked at my daughter, the woman I could barely recognize, and I did not know what to feel. The anger had burned out, leaving nothing but a cold, hollow emptiness. My family was a casualty of a war I did not even know I was fighting, a war that had been waged under my own roof. They carried me down the stairs, past the splintered remains of my front door, and out into the flashing chaos of the night. The red and blue lights of the ambulance pulsed across Mike's face as he stood beside me, his hand still on my shoulder, a steady, grounding presence in a world that had come unmoored. "Ribs," I managed to say, the word a painful gasp. "He broke my ribs." "We will take care of you, Colonel," one of the paramedics said gently, his voice calm and professional as he fitted an oxygen mask over my face. "Just try to breathe." Mike gave my hand a squeeze, a gesture of profound, unspoken understanding. "You did good, Jake. You did real good. That SOS, you stubborn old bastard, you saved your own life." I closed my eyes against the flashing lights, letting the cool, clean oxygen fill my lungs. The pain was still there, a roaring fire in my side, a constant, brutal reminder of the past few weeks. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, underneath it all, I felt safe. I was not saved by a social worker or a concerned neighbor making a hesitant phone call. I was saved by a brother, someone who spoke my language, who understood the silent codes we lived by, who honored my legacy. Rick had tried to erase that legacy, to call it junk and sell it for parts. But in the end, it was that legacy, that old forgotten skill, that brought justice crashing down his door. The Marine Corps Brotherhood, it never dies. Rick Vance never made bail. With his prior record and the long, ugly list of new charges, kidnapping with bodily harm, torture, elder abuse, financial fraud, he was done. The district attorney, a sharp young woman with eyes that missed nothing, told me he would die in prison. There would be no parole. Sarah, she testified against him. In the stark, quiet formality of the courtroom, under the harsh lights, she finally spoke the truth. I watched her on the stand, a fragile, broken figure, her voice barely a whisper, as she recounted the horror. In the end, after everything, the terror finally gave way. I do not know if I can ever truly forgive her for that final click of the lock. That is a different kind of wound, the kind that scars over on the inside and aches when the weather changes. It takes longer to heal. She is in therapy now, trying to piece herself back together from the wreckage he made of her. I hope one day she finds the woman she was supposed to be, the one I remember from before he came along. I spent a week in the hospital, 4 broken ribs, a concussion, and a constellation of deep, ugly bruises that mapped out the final, brutal days. When I was finally discharged, Mike drove me home, and when I walked in, wincing with every step, the house was full. Not of ghosts and fear, but of my brothers from the VFW. They had cleaned the place from top to bottom. The lazy-boy recliner Rick had claimed, the one that still held the faint, sour smell of him, was gone. They had hauled it to the dump without even asking, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were installing a new security system, a proper one, with cameras and alarms. They had already repaired the bedroom door, hung it on new, solid steel hinges that would not be so easily broken. The house smelled like my house again. Not of cheap beer and terror. It smelled of lemon polish, sawdust, and fresh coffee. It smelled like home. Mike led me into my office. He was carrying something, my Yaesu radio. There was a deep, ugly dent in the metal casing from where Rick's boot had connected, a permanent scar. Mike had taken it to a specialist, an old Navy radio man who worked out of his garage. He had repaired the internal components. He set it back in its place of honor in the corner. "Still works, Colonel," he said, his voice quiet. I ran my hand over the cool metal, my fingers tracing the outline of the dent. It was not just a radio, it was a monument, a testament to the fact that experience is never obsolete, that your legacy, it has real, tangible power. That dent was not damage anymore. It was a battle scar, and it was beautiful. I sold the house a few months later. There were too many bad memories soaked into the walls. I could still hear the echoes of the taunts, still feel the phantom chill of the locked room. I moved into a smaller, safer place in a quiet retirement community just down the road from the VFW post. And I started volunteering. I started talking to other veterans about the silent burdens we carry, about the pride that makes us hide our pain, both physical and emotional, until it nearly kills us. I told them my story, not for pity, not for praise, but to show them that asking for help is not a weakness. It is a strategic act of survival. It is reinforcing your position before you get overrun. You know, Rick took my money, he broke my bones, and he tried his best to take my dignity. But he failed. He could not take who I am. He could not take what I have learned, what I stand for. My hardest battle was not fought in some foreign jungle half a world away. It was fought in my own home, against the fear of getting old, of becoming dependent, of becoming invisible. And I won. Not with a rifle, not with my fists, but with 3 dots, 3 dashes, and 3 dots. Thank you all for listening to my story. It was not an easy one to tell, but I tell it because I know, somewhere out there, there might be another father, another grandfather, who is feeling invisible or feeling like a burden. Do not you believe it for a second. Your experience has value. Your legacy matters. And never, ever be ashamed to ask for help, especially from the brothers who stood beside you, who speak your language. This is Colonel Jake Walsh, signing off.